So the joys of technology. All right, I'm going to explain Salesforce Analytics Cloud. So we're going to catch the wave. Got a little theme music here to get us started, right? A little Hawaii 5-0. So we can rock out. So what are we going to cover tonight? Well, first of all, as Pierre said, Carl Brundage, Brown Belt accredited. So I went through a training program that Salesforce was offering to partners up in Toronto at the end of April. I have a few other Salesforce certifications, and my interesting little tidbit is I've rode over 3.6 million meters in my lifetime, most of it on a Concept 2 rower. Tonight we're going to cover an introduction to the Analytics Cloud, look at terminology and setup. Then we're going to actually go into the system. So I'm not going to go through all these slides. I'll share them with you for background information, but we'll take a look at loading data through data sets and data flows, exploring data through lenses, sharing data with dashboards, and if we have time, we'll take a look at some advanced topics. Feel free to interject with any questions along the way that you may have or things that you need explained further. I want to make this as interactive as possible for everyone. So let's start with a little bit of terminology. Wave versus the Analytics Cloud. What's going on? These terms have been thrown out. Are they interchangeable or are they different? Well, Wave is the platform. Just like Force.com is the platform, Wave provides the underlying technology. It's not a product, it's not a solution, it is a platform. How is it different than maybe traditional databases? Well, it's search-based technology. It's not a database like SQL Server or Oracle. It's more similar to Hadoop. It's columnar, schema-free, and non-relational. Everything gets stored in key value pairs. So your data and your value get stored together. And it's an inverted index. So think of like the index in the back of a book that tells you, if you look for a particular word, this is what page it's on. That's the way that database behaves inside of Wave. So that's a platform. Analytics Cloud is the product, much like Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or Marketing Cloud. What it gives you is really three things. It's cloud-based. Everything's up in Salesforce's infrastructure. It's a mobile-first approach, so all of your data and analytics you can get on your phone, and it's really geared towards self-service, so you can interact with data and really understand what's going on your own without IT, without other people needing to be involved. From an architecture standpoint, this sits alongside of Salesforce. Salesforce is still here. It's providing the authentication into the environment. It's providing the user interface for Analytics Cloud, but all the requests, that gets passed off into what they're calling a super pod. That's where it's handling the queues. So all the requests coming in get distributed to the different nodes to handle ETL, so for loading information, or for splitting out data sets into different places for parallel processing, as well as the querying and returning everything. So that's kind of the structure that they have. It sits alongside of what's currently there, which you're used to from the pods, but then the user interface and security is integrated in. So what are the key concepts? We're going to look at how you explore, so how you can ask questions across your CRM, but also ERP, the Internet of Things, any type of external data that can be brought into the Analytics Cloud and be explored. It's also an area for, collaboration, a place where you can have discussions, all your data is in one place, single source of the truth, and then you can share that information via email, via chat, or to other people. Because it's in the cloud, it's up and running very quickly. You don't have to go and install hardware. You don't have to install a BI platform. You don't have to go through all the process of the BI project of mapping your data, creating your data sets, loading information. It's there for you as part of the platform. And you can scale very quickly and very, very large. So where if we were on-premise, you'd have to buy more servers to handle additional hardware. Here you have the cloud and Salesforce infrastructure at your disposal. And like I mentioned, mobile, everything's on the go in the palm of your hand. You have those reports on your device. Those of you that are familiar with Salesforce, you might start asking a question, well, how is this different than Salesforce reporting, which at one point in time they did have the analytics term for? Well, analytics has been moved completely to the cloud. Salesforce reporting, it's about analyzing reports and dashboards. You only have access to Salesforce data, and the data is real time. And what I mean by that is if I run a report right now, I'll see all the opportunities in my system. If Virgil goes and enters another opportunity and I run the report again in 5 minutes, I'll see his additional opportunity added to it. The Analytics Cloud, you explore with lenses and dashboards. You have Salesforce data and external data, but more importantly, the data is updated on a schedule. So you might do a nightly refresh or a weekly refresh. So you won't see that activity in real time, So the report I run now and the report I run 5 minutes from now, as long as there wasn't a data load, it'll look exactly the same. So you have that consistency from reports. So what makes up the Analytics Cloud? What are its components? It all starts with the data set. The data set is the piece of information that holds what you load either from Salesforce, from a system like SAP. You can push CSV files. There's even a connector inside of Excel where you can push data directly into the Analytics Cloud. So that holds your information. Now, when you want to start analyzing it, you build lenses. So think of those as different views into your data. You can build a bar graph. You can build a pie graph. You can have lines over time, different ways that you want to start analyzing your data. You put together multiple lenses into a dashboard. The dashboard is then what you share with other people in order to answer a particular question. How are our sales doing this quarter? Well, you can have multiple lenses on the dashboard to see where you're trending, where you're doing well, where you're not doing so hot. All of these things live inside of an app, so you can bundle it together, provide security on top of that app of who you want to share to, who wants to have access. And if we have time at the end, we'll take a little bit deeper look into ways that you can secure your data inside of Analytics Cloud. So the data set in a little more detail. This is where you have those key value pairs. It's the search-based technology, and it's really scalable. Everything's stored in parallel here, so you can have massively large data sets, millions or even billions of rows. The lens, what does that consist of? Consists of measures, so what you want to look at, the amount of sales, how long it takes to close a case, all the different values that you have in your system. Your groups are the dimensions that you want to look at. Look at things by owner, by the type of account, what industry an account is in. Filters let you limit the data. So for example, we only want to look at opportunities that are closing this month, for example. And then the view is really the chart that you want to select. So all those things go into a lens. You can save a lens and then pop it into your dashboard. So your dashboard is interactive widgets. The nice thing here is when you change selectors, it'll change all the rest of the data on your dashboard. So if you were to pick a particular owner or a particular region, then all these number widgets, which you can use for KPIs, the charts, those will all change. You can even link out to additional reports. So if you want to have related information, you can take a look at that. So those are the components that we're going to take a look at in a moment. Now, how do you get access? Well, the Analytics Cloud has three things: platform license, permission set, and then permissions. So from a platform license, this is what you need to have access to the Analytics Cloud. There's some limits that come with it, like everything else with Salesforce. Each platform license gives you up to 400 users, 50 concurrent queries, so queries running at the same time, and 250 million registered rows. I'll talk about registered rows in a little bit, but you could have a data set of 1 billion rows. As long as you narrow it down to 250 before you register, then you're fine. Well, you might ask, well, what if I need 500 million rows? Well, you can buy multiple platform licenses. From a list perspective, this is list. You know, nobody pays list price. Platform licenses are $40,000 a month. There are discounts, there are packages, there are specials being run where you can have a package of 10 million rows and 10 users on a limited number of apps for significantly less based off your needs. But if you want this and list, that gives you an idea of what the pricing is for it.
On the concurrent users, is that when it farms it?
Concurrent queries. So yes, if I ask for a request,
query and it farms 51 or more.
but the queries, you'll see the queries are actually run fairly quickly. So the concurrent it's not too bad.
I don't know if it was my query or when it farmed its query.
Yep, when it did. So then there's two types of permission set licenses that you can have. The first one is around exploring inside the Analytics Cloud. This is the permission set license with less functionality. It's really for looking at data with lenses, looking at data with dashboards. You can save lenses. It doesn't have all the powers in the system. This is $150 per user per month list. The Analytics Cloud Builder is the one where you're creating things from scratch. This is kind of your full power user that will go in, load in a data set, build lenses, create and edit dashboards, publish information. This one is $250 per month per user. What also comes into play is these permission set licenses have to be added on top of an existing Salesforce license. and only of the following type: app, one app, full CRM, platform, or platform one. It means you're not putting it on top of a chatter-free license. So not only does somebody need access to Analytics Cloud, they need to have some type of Salesforce license as well too. That then leads into the set of permissions. You can see the difference between Explorer. It's really using the Analytics Cloud and uploading data, where the builder has all the additional permissions. And if you're interested later, I have all the permissions and what it actually gives you in the system. I'm going to be going in as a builder, so I will have full permission for everything that we take a look at today. And that's the end of my slides. There's about 30 or 40 more here with background information that we'll make available after the presentation. So if you want to go look up something, but I'm going to spend the rest of the time in the Analytics Cloud. Questions while I'm switching over? Okay. No. So when you first come in, you have access to Analytics Cloud in your setup. And what it'll give you is it'll give you a summary of where you stand against your limits, the data sets that you have, some tasks to get you started, like adding users, creating the permission set license. So it'll really walk you through that setup process as an administrator the first time. You also have support here. So if you need to get to a glossary of terms, if you need to get to the setup process, you can get to all those links. If you didn't have an Analytics Cloud when you first came in here, you would just see a button that says Enable Analytics, and you would need to have your platform license in place. So once that's done, Analytics is just an app like anything else. I have mine open here, and it takes me to the home screen. The home screen inside the Analytics Cloud gives you access to all the things that I just talked about, right? You have your apps across the top, you have your dashboards, you have your lenses, and if I scroll down, you will see a series of data sets as well too. If you were so interested, you could actually jump into each of these sections and take a look at the different pieces one by one. So if you just wanted to look at all your data sets, you could. I've gone through, I've loaded up some information. You can see that these particular pieces have an icon. These actually came from CSV files. These do not. These came from Salesforce. So what we'll do is we'll actually take a look at loading data into Analytics Cloud. We can do that in one of, I'll say 3 or 4 ways, but really it comes down to 2 ways behind the scenes. The first thing is when we create a data set, we can build that directly from Salesforce. And what you'll see is a nice interactive builder that I'll show you next on how we get data from Salesforce directly into the Analytics Cloud. The other thing we can do is we can load a CSV file, which I'll show you. It uses the external API for loading data into Analytics Cloud. We could also, there's an Excel-based connector that I'm not going to show you tonight. I do have a blog post about it, where you can, right from within Excel, highlight a set of data and push it directly into Analytics Cloud. Or you could even use one of the vendors that's there from an integration perspective: Informatica, MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Dalboomi, SnapLogic, or I believe it's IBM CastIron, to push data in. It's all using the APIs. That's why I say there's 3 or 4 ways, but it all comes back to either Salesforce native data or using the API. So let's go ahead and jump into Salesforce and pick a data set for this. What you get is a nice little search tool where you can look for all of your, let me rephrase that, your objects that are, all your objects are available here, but only ones that have a bulk API representation can actually be loaded in. So you may think you're going to try and be sneaky and expose something through Lightning Connect. It'll show up in the list, and I can bring it into the Analytics Cloud. No, that doesn't work yet. It has to have a bulk API for it to come in. So if I search for opportunity, this will bring back my opportunity object. What I can do is drop it down and see different information about it. What's more interesting is to hit the plus. Now I get a set of fields that I want to select. By default, it'll take all your fields. If you start selecting fields, then you actually have to pick what you want. So in this case, things like description doesn't really make sense in an analytics product. So we'll keep attributes like date-based information, category information. I don't care about the modified date. Let's grab a name, next step, the ID, the probability, the stage, whether it was 1 or not. So that's interesting, right? We know the opportunities, but what account is this opportunity on? We don't have that in our opportunity object. So what we can do is we can jump over to relationships. What this will do is show us all the relationships. Do we need to put that down? Is that bothering anybody yet? Okay.
That's fine.
So if we click on join, now what you'll see is it's jumped out into our account object. So from here, we can go ahead and pick things like the account name, the account ID. I'm going to grab a couple of pick lists later on, the account source, the account type. And this SIC description, I thought there was one more I want, industry. What I want to caution you on is if you see that there are things like annual revenue, that's a number. When you have something on the right side of a join, you don't want to bring that into Analytics Cloud, because what will happen is if the account is in the list twice and you match it and it's $1 million of annual revenue and another $1 million of annual revenue, yeah, now you have $2 million of annual revenue. That's not the right answer. So you'd want to build a separate data set that looks just out of the account if you want to bring in metrics that are on the right side when you're building out your data sets this way. And then just to make it interesting, we could go another level. We could go to the user and see who owns it and pull in the name of the rep. So there should be full name here. All right, so now you're like, okay, great. I just need to create that data set and we should be all set. Well, not exactly. Just because we create a data set, it doesn't mean the data has actually run. What happens is this information gets put into a data flow that then has to execute. So before I go in the data flow, one of the things you're going to see is we need to take a little bit of a look behind the scenes in Analytics Cloud. There's a lot of things you can do with data, but the real power comes in looking behind the scenes. All the data sets, all the data flows are built in JSON format. So there's actually places where you start needing to manipulate JSON data in order to get Analytics Cloud to do the things that you want to do. This is an easy version of it, where we're actually looking at the data flow that corresponds to what we just built. What you'll see is some basic transformations. This is an SFDC digest. That simply means pull data from Salesforce. So what do I want to pull from Salesforce? Well, I want to pull the opportunity object, and I want to pull these fields. Same thing again, you'll see a digest for account and a digest for user. Okay, that's good, but how do we actually put these data sets together? Well, that's done with an augment transformation, which is really just a join. You say on the left, I have account. On the right, I have on the left, I have 100, which if we go back up here to 100, you can see 100 is opportunity. And then 101 is account. So it actually uses the names from the previous steps to join those things together. So join 100, which is opportunity, to 101, which is account, and bring forward this information. And then you'll see another join again in order to pull in the user information. So what's happening is each step in the process, it actually creates another data set. So register creates a data set, and then augment creates another data set. That's where I said you could have 500 million rows. As long as you get down to your last set, which is down here, SFDC register, those are the only rows that count against you in the Analytics Cloud. So you can go from a lot of data, narrow it down just to what you need when you finally register. So I'm going to go ahead and create this data set. We can decide which hour it in. I'll put tonight. And what it's going to tell me is that the information for this data set has been appended to the data flow. If you want to create it, then you actually need to start the data flow now. So I'm going to go over to the data flow monitor. We can take a look at it. You can see I was experimenting earlier, so I did have a failure, but it's a listing of the different runs. Once you've executed your first data flow, every 24 hours, the data flow will execute automatically. So it's on a once per day schedule, but you can run it manually if you need to.
Can you schedule it?
Yes, so there's a schedule button right there. So you can change the schedule for this data flow. Right now, my first time I ran it was around 2 p.m., so it's set to run at 1:59. We could change that to whatever we needed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this upload and download button again. Oops, sorry, I want to use download first. Because what this will do is it will download the whole data flow in JSON format. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use an online editor. It's just a basic JSON online editor, which will give me some nice formatting to take a look. And what you can see is I had some data from before. These objects, they've actually just had the latest data flow appended to the end of it. So it just keeps adding stuff to it. You can manually change this file. So if you didn't want to reload one of your data sets, you could take out steps. You could go in here and do things like load data that was previously loaded from an external source and then merge it with Salesforce data. That's called an EdgeMart transformation to load it in. I actually have a blog post about that where I take a CSV file, load it in, and then pull that out in a data flow and push it in with Salesforce data. So that's where I say you can do some things with clicks, but a lot of the power is unlocked by playing with the code behind the scenes. All right, while we're waiting, I will go ahead and run this load. It'll take a minute or two. And I'll jump back to my data set and just show you that from a CSV perspective, it's pretty simple as well too. We can select or drag a file here. I have a simple file of sales data. That's product, account name, date, and quantity. What happens is when you first drag a file here, it attempts to guess what the format is and creates the JSON for you to load the data file. See me saying JSON a lot, right? You're going to all be JSON experts by the time we're done here.
But they don't have a UI for this.
And they will. You know, that's the thing. Like, it's coming out in pieces. Salesforce has never been shy about releasing something in version 0.1. You're like, wow, that's really rough around the edges. Yeah, it is. They'll eventually get it caught up. But right now, it's a lot of manual file editing, which when you sit through training, you're like, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, more power to me because nobody else is going to be able to figure this out. So they need to use consultants, which is great for those on the consulting side. Exactly. So here's what you have. You just have a CSV connector, the name, the fields. It's taking a guess at the data types. Sometimes you have to watch your format. Because it's a CSV file, it'll auto guess the date format. But if you are in like a European format or you have a lot of 1-1s, it might switch the month and the day. So you need to come in manually change that. If you'll notice, it's guessed for things on text. So things that are text become your dimension. Things that are numeric become your measures. You could also change the precision and scale here if you need to. So I'll jump back.
So where'd you pick up that CSV from?
Just from my desktop.
Okay, and so it'll automatically, so I could write a script that'll drop it on a desk, drop it in a location, and it'll run a script every 24 hours to reload the data from the CSV.
No, CSVs are manually loaded only. So my data set will be created within the hour. What's that?
They'll probably eventually have an API.
Well, they do because the CSV upload is doing nothing more than calling the data load APIs behind the scenes. So you could write something on your own. There's a Java utility that you can use that has the APIs in it, or that's where you could go to a partner like a Dell Boomi or Informatica and have that be
the partners. If I had it hooked into a bus or something, or Dell Boomi would do it. They can load it from there.
Yes. So okay. I've worked with Informatica. I've gone through some of they have a cloud academy where you can get in an environment, and it's exactly what happens. Informatica takes care of the schedule of pulling the file and then pushing it in through the APIs.
Oh, they push it into it?
They push it in through the APIs
so
at that point in time. So no, it doesn't actually pull.
Suck it in there anymore.
No, the schedule is only set up to run things from Salesforce and then additional edits you've made to the data flow. So in my example before, where I took an external CSV that was already there and augmented it with Salesforce data, that piece would work. So it's almost 7 o'clock. The TV will be turning off here momentarily. If we take a look at data sets, we'll refresh and see if we pulled in any of our new ones here. So it was really funny when I was up in training. Anytime something didn't show up quite right, they're like, yeah, that's a cache issue. Just refresh your browser. But honestly, it usually came back after you refreshed your browser. So I did sample sales and I did opportunity. right? Now we're at the perfect place, if there aren't any questions, to jump into exploring data with lenses. Okay, so let's take sample sales, just because it was a simple CSV file. And apparently, there we go. What it'll do is it will start out with a nice simple count of rows. So I had 2.5K rows in my data set. This is where we can start playing around with how we want to analyze the data. You have your measures up here, so we could switch from count of rows to sum of price and see, well, I added it. We can easily get rid of that. That I have about $20,000 in sales. We can start adding groups to this. So we could look at it by the account name. We could start changing the display. So if we wanted to do columns or a stack bar, we could add that information. If we want to swap this out, let me swap it out for the product, because what I'll show you is we could build something like a donut chart. So you can see your breakdown by product. Now, I did some random number generating. That's why the data looks pretty well even. When my sales data, I built just something that would randomly create sales data for you in a particular range. Probably the coolest feature that they told us the whole time was if you hold down control when you pick a different chart type, you get the slow motion effect. Yeah. So the coolest but most useless feature that they showed us the whole week.
So Carl, you're just looking at the CSV data.
I'm just looking at the CSV data, absolutely. What we could do is we could jump to a different data set. So if I wanted, we could take a look at the opportunities with accounts. So this would be the data that came over from Salesforce. So I have 8 opportunities, not a lot of exciting data in my system, but we could switch this and turn back on the TV. You got it.
That's it. You're good.
That's it. Time to drink.
Good.
There it goes. We just use our imaginations.
All right. So I could add a group and I could start looking at things by industry, for example. So we get a breakdown of the data inside of Salesforce. I think we'll keep our fingers crossed here that if I look at, is it sample sales? No, sales with accounts. So this is a data set that I brought in. Nope, it didn't work yet. This was a data set that I was starting to work to show you where I augment the 2 pieces of data, an external sales and a file, along with what's inside of Salesforce. But my data didn't, I had something wrong in my join, so it actually didn't get added in.
It's a refresh problem.
No, it was my problem, unfortunately. I'll take the blame on that one. Okay, we took a look at, I was inside of sample sales. We had picked a stack bar, grouped by product. We can start doing some other things. You could actually start putting focus on one of these items, like taking a look at Crustios and actually drill in by account. So you can do drill pass to see which accounts are selling your most data. You can clear that off and start applying a filter. So if you wanted to look at sales for a particular period, you could do a nice little slider and see everything that was done just this year. So this is a relative date filter. So as your time changes, this will slide along with you. It doesn't have to be an absolute date. I guess I picked something that was very slow to render, not to run. Usually the execution is fine. It's the rendering on the browser that takes a minute. So really, you're only constrained by, I'd say, your imagination and what's the best way to explore this particular piece of data. No sense waiting for this to run. The other thing you can do is once you select particular measures, you can paste them as filters on other graphs. You can paste them as focus items on other charts. So you can really limit your data in a lot of different ways. All right, let me jump into a couple of lenses that I had saved before. So inside of my cases app, I have a couple of lenses. So what I have is case data, so issues that were submitted to a help desk and when they were resolved. So I have things broken down by region. What you can do is you can save a particular lens. So if you want to come back and look at that view, you can save it and give it a name. You can use save as, which will save it as something different. You then have this history option where you can jump back in history. Right now, we haven't really done anything, so it's not too exciting. But if we were to change to a heat map, for example, well, then we could jump back to anywhere in our history or even go back to start. This is a reset. This will reset your lens back to the first view when you opened it. When you get to the point where you have something kind of cool, let's do a raw data table, for example. So we have all the raw data underneath. We can use this clip to designer option. What this does is it takes the view of our lens and starts a new dashboard for us. So now we've gone from viewing data and exploring with it to building a dashboard that we can then share our information with somebody else. From a dashboard perspective, you have different widgets that you can use. Chart's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to put some type of metric on here, you can use the chart. Raw data is that data table that I just showed you. Compare is a compare table, which will highlight differences. And number is really designed for KPIs. What you'll see is if I click one of these, they'll start adding them to my table or to my dashboard. If I click on chart, you notice this lens grays out. Because this is a raw data table, I can't put it in a chart widget. But what I can do is I can click the raw data widget, select my chart, and put it in here. And then I have a bunch of properties that I can start displaying. Do I want to have faceted? What that means is as I change a filter, will this particular piece of information change? Do I want to have initial selection, like maybe looking at only the last 30 days of information? All those things are available from within a dashboard. In this section, you have the filters that you want to apply. So do you want to limit something by range? So a start date and end date. Do you want to have a list? And I'll come back to show you a list. Do you want to do a date filter, a toggle select, which is kind of an overall filter for a database? If I jump back to my region lens and reset it, what I can do is I can clip multiple times. So actually, I could clip this to designer. When I come back to my dashboard, now you'll see there's another lens down here. Where can I put it? Well, I can put it in a chart, or I can put it as a list filter. What you'll notice is as I select things like Northeast, the data will change. We have a bunch of data, so it's actually not so exciting here. But you'll notice there's 24,000 rows here versus Midwest, where there's only 352. So if you watch this, it does actually change. Created date goes from 1 to 2. So your dashboard is fully interactive, that what you change from a filter perspective will affect things on the other side. You have a few styling components here where you can change the text. You can put in a box. So if you want to have some color, you can do that. Information. You can put a link to a YouTube video or a link to another dashboard or lens. And as you can see, my dashboard looks like what most developers' dashboards look like. Not very nice because we're not designers. So what I would encourage you to do is there are dashboard templates out there. So if I go to dashboards, Salesforce has helped publish a set of templates that kind of look nice, and they work on mobile devices. So rather than needing to start from scratch and thinking about, well, where do I want to put this widget? Where do I want to use? This has a layout for you where you have a header where you can put a background image. You can put a KPI here. This is your most important chart. This is your important numbers. So there's things that will help facilitate how you actually go about building your dashboard. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about where all the powerful features are when you're building dashboards. And guess what? It's in the JSON files behind the scenes. So There is a super secret, very powerful link where if you notice inside of Analytics Cloud, we've been doing explore.apexp. If you go to lens.apexp, you get all the metadata behind the scenes. So what you can do, I'll refresh. This section that says lenses, it actually means dashboards. So what I can do is I can pick one of my dashboards. So I'm going to take the dashboard template, and guess what? I got a bunch of JSON. We're going to go to our handy dandy JSON editor and take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of stuff here that I'll say is not important, but the section that I just closed called state, that's where all the magic happens. This is where you specify the widgets that you want to have on the screen, information like their colors and their positioning. Right now, the dashboard is based off of pixel location. So you put a widget in a place, it records the pixel location. Okay, not bad for building dashboards for desktop, but really crappy when it comes to working on mobile. Well, no fear. There are ways to handle that, which is what I want to jump into next. As soon as I can find it. So when you come to working on a mobile platform, you have layouts for your particular devices. And it's all based off HTML tags, spans and call spans and where you let things flow. So this is, if you're on an iPhone, what do you want to have? Well, because I'm using a template, this has all been built for me. If you were going on your own dashboard, you would need to think about, well, how is somebody accessing this on an iPhone, and build out the particular layouts, have all your columns going through and flowing appropriately. You can see this is page 0. The nice thing you can do on the mobile devices is you can actually swipe. So you can have page 0, page 1, page 2. So you can look at a chart, you can interact with the chart, but then you can swipe to the next piece of information, swipe to the next piece of information. All that's done with the layouts here. You can see from the iPad, you have the 2 orientations, whether it's in portrait and landscape. If I'm remembering correctly from my training, landscape, you're usually using 4 columns. 6 columns. Portrait is 4 columns. And then on the phone, you're really working with 2 columns. So that's generally the layouts that they're specifying for the particular devices. There's a lot of other stuff that you can do inside of these dashboard templates. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but there's a concept called SACL. You may have heard that out there, the Salesforce Analytics query language. It is based off of Pig Latin language. So what you can do is if I jump to one of my dashboards, I'm going to go to the cases dashboard. You can actually start writing really advanced SACL statements that do whatever you want inside of the particular dashboard. So I showed you, hey, you can build metrics, but you can't do. In the past, you couldn't put 2 lines on a chart. You couldn't compare different measures together. Inside of SACL, you can do a lot of that. So what I have here is a SACL statement that focuses in on close date. Let me pull it up for you. Sorry, it's up at the top. I grabbed the wrong one. My apologies. So there's a section in here for PIGQL, and that's where you would put in the statement. And you have things like loading from a data set, going through and filtering, co-grouping information. So you can group 2 data sets together and then combine them inside the statement. You can union. So really a powerful language. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but there's documentation out there on how you would use that to actually build out your particular pieces. 2 other things I want to show you here in the last few minutes. One is the concept of XMD. That's extended metadata. You may have noticed back here when I was going through particular lenses that the information didn't always look great. So let me grab the opportunity data set. So I'm going to go in opportunities. When I was drilling into different groupings, you kind of see the names are run together, account ID, billing city. You know, that's not a great way to display information to a user. So what you can do is you can upload extended metadata, which will let you control the names of dimensions and measures, the formats. So is it a percentage? Is it a dollar sign? You can assign colors to different elements. You can hide columns from people. There's a hard way to do it and an easy way to do it. The easy way, I've included a link at the end of the presentation where you create this bookmarklet. And what it will do is when you're on a data set, it'll actually let you get the full XMD. And you can see things down here like, oh, all right, for this data set, I see that account owner ID email is alias this way. Guess what? We can change that. We can change that to employee email. We'll submit the updated XMD. Because it closed, we know that it worked successfully. Here, so that we don't have a caching issue, I will close the data set and reload it. And then I just have to remember what I called it, which was employee email. And now you can see it's employee email. So you can go through the XMD and make changes to all those pieces of information to really control how your data looks and feels. I would be remiss if I didn't talk for my last couple minutes about security. We talked about how you can use apps to share information, the data sets that you put in, who has access to it. But once you have access to a data set, by default, you have access to all the rows in the data set. There are ways to control that, and you can do it with security predicates. So how does that work? Well, if we come into one of our data sets and edit it, you may have noticed down here there's a security predicate. So what you can do is you can start referencing other pieces of information. If you know inside of your data set you have the owner ID, you can say where owner ID equals current user. So it will actually pull the currently logged in user to Salesforce and apply that as a filter to the data set so they can only see their data. That's the way that's in place right now for limiting when somebody goes into the Analytics Cloud what they see.
Is there anything pre-built with like the role hierarchy? Sharing?
Nope, sharing rules don't apply. The role hierarchy doesn't. There is a user that you pick that runs the integration. That integration user is limited based off of what they can see inside of Salesforce.
Okay.
But once the data is inside of Salesforce, no role hierarchy, no sharing rules. The security predicate is the way if you want to limit someone's access to data outside of an app. An app is kind of all or nothing. If you want to get fine-grained and say, well, Jim should only see the opportunities that he has created, you can do that. It gets a little trickier if you're talking about a manager down the hierarchy. There are ways to say, show me anybody underneath me and my information, because what you can do is you can actually roll all of the hierarchy into a single column because it's multi-valued. You can put all the reps in a hierarchy and the managers all in one data column and kind of do a where it's in this particular piece with the hierarchy, the security predicate hierarchy. So there's lots of other kind of advanced things that I have in my tool bag that I could bring out and show you, but this is kind of an overview of Analytics Cloud. What other questions do we have before we wrap up? Peter.
Can you take any actions that affect Salesforce from the Analytics Cloud? Like, I'm looking at cases, do something.
So you can link into Salesforce. So I didn't show you, but through the XMD, you can set up links in a compare table where you have the ID of an account and you have the name. You can create a hyperlink. So in the table, when you hyperlink, it'll take you back to Salesforce and take you right to that case. It is not going to update data in Salesforce, but you can link directly to it. So good question. Right now, it's been focused really on getting things into the Analytics Cloud. There's not a lot of kind of getting stuff out. They do have a pilot going on where you can make calls into the Analytics Cloud and get back charts. So if you were building a custom app, for example, you could call in and show a chart in it, but you can't really like export this data. Well, you know, I get to hear, how can I copy this data out? That's not really what it's designed for at this point in time. It's to have that single source of truth, keep everything in the system. Other questions?
There's no mining capabilities, right? I mean, it won't introspect the data set and look for patterns and anomalies within data. It's very simple. You got to literally set up your groups and filters.
By itself, no. I believe there are third-party apps that are working on the predictive analysis type of things to take a look at that, but it's not native. It's extended through partners and other relationships.
I have some questions from somebody watching the stream, actually.
Okay.
So there's 3 of them. I'll give you the easy one first. Are there any free accounts?
So right now, the way I got access to this, as a Salesforce partner, there was 2 pieces of training that I had access to. A white belt training in the Premier Training Catalog. It used to be called white belt. It's now like AN001. After you pass that, you can get green belt. It's like AN002. Once you have those things, you can ask to join the chatter group inside of Org62, which is Salesforce's org. In there, there's a link to a partner demo environment request where you have to fill out a partner form to say how you are using the Sales Cloud, and then they'll give you access to an environment. If you're not a partner, just tell them you're interested and you want to do an evaluation, and they'll be all over it. I mean, they are looking to sell this. So from a client's perspective, if you have a sincere interest, then I would contact your Salesforce rep and have access there. From a partner, that's the angle to get access to your demo environment.
Cool.
All right, the harder ones
I
now.
thought that was an easy one.
So they want to know some more use cases for where Wave would really be useful in the business.
Sure. I'm going to go back to health and life sciences, which is an industry I'm very familiar with. In health and life sciences, there's third-party data providers that will tell you like every script that a doctor has written across the whole country. They do a projection, they do a census. It isn't like they're collecting every piece of data, but this can be millions of rows of data. Loading that into Salesforce every month, because it changes every month, can be very clunky. So now a very good use case is to bring that data into Analytics Cloud, pull over your account information, your territory information from Salesforce, combine it together, and then send it out to the reps. So the reps can see their trend over the last 6 months of where scripts are going to a particular doctor, because that's a component of their incentive compensation. Reps are compensated on increase in scripts or market share penetration. So that where you have external data and Salesforce data makes a lot of sense. Where Analytics Cloud is a tough sell right now is if you're just trying to sell it by itself. You don't have Salesforce. You're not a Salesforce customer. It's not as good of a story right now because it's so easy. You guys saw that. Getting data in from Salesforce was just a couple clicks, run the data flow, and you're there. You know, if you're not, well, then you have to go through the setup and get everything else. So that's the first set of use cases where things apply. And one example from my previous experience that would make a lot of sense if we had the Salesforce Analytics Cloud at the time. All right, the last question. This is going to be the hard one.
This one won't be too bad. They want to know more about like the development platform for Wave. I think it's just basically JSON, but is there any other way to extend it?
Yeah, I would take a look. I have some links to the full documentation library in my presentation, which we'll make available after the meetup, that talks through the different development guides on how do you develop in SOCL, how do you use the API if you want to push data in, what is the pilot API for taking data, or sending a request to the Analytics Cloud and having a chart come back to you that you can display in another app. So there are resources out there to help kind of understand more around how you develop and what are some of the capabilities. And honestly, they are doing the 3 releases a year, but they're also doing interim releases in between. So they're really having 6 releases on Analytics Cloud per year right now. So what I learned at the end of April, some things have already changed already. Like the schedule button, I don't remember seeing a schedule button there before when you asked me. So it's like, oh, there's a schedule button. It literally, the trainer that was going through that said that, well, this didn't work last week. Well, now we have it. The way that you do links and tables that Peter asked about, it changed between April and now. So it is constantly evolving. So even if you don't see something that you like now, because it will definitely be different. Any other questions from on the line?
No, that was it.
All right. Yes, Mr. Neal. Bring us home. Last question.
Is there any limit on how many data sets you can bring in?
As long as you're under the 250 million registered rows, it doesn't matter. If you bought one of the special deals, there may be limitations that say, well, you can have 10 data sets and then 10 rows. But the full platform license with that set of stuff, no.
One more quick question.
Sure.
So we have the 250 million registered rows. Is there some other limit before you get to registered?
No, it's only the registered rows.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl.
How do I stop this?
Go. Switch back to that one screen with the other, like your other Google Chrome window.
Ah, there we go.